Welcome to the Gold Standard GAMSAT, analysis of the new GAMSAT. This is Dr. Ferdinand, author of the Gold Standard GAMSAT books. The last video focused on the structure and security of the exam, and this video will focus on strategies that are specific to this new format. I also must qualify that this video was produced on April 24th, using information available as of today. Obviously, if you intend to sit the May-June GAMSAT, you must continue to perform your due diligence and keep up to date with any emails or announcements regarding modifications or clarifications related to the new GAMSAT format. So let's talk about strategies. The first thing that I need to mention is about your studying is motivation. For some students, the global pandemic has resulted in intellectual paralysis. And so sometimes it's important to reacquaint yourself with your motivations for studying medicine or dentistry or whatever you need a GAMSAT score for. And that you realize that this might be a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to sit the exam this way and to be given so much extra time. Essentially, you will be getting a half an hour extra for Section 3. Now, I know that includes the 10-minute reading time, but the idea that you can start the exam and have approximately 2 minutes per multiple choice question would be like Christmas, Hanukkah, New Year's, and your national holiday all combined into one had students from the last 20 years been given this same opportunity. You have enough time. Please don't squander this chance. Now, regarding your schedule, ideally you have a plan for the weeks leading up to the real exam. And if not, you would design it this week. We have prepared a week-by-week GAMSAT study schedule designed for an average student, so obviously you would have to tailor it to your specific circumstances. Nonetheless, I will leave a link in the description so that you can see what an ideal study week looks like, including for the period just prior to sitting the exam. In the end, however, the best GAMSAT study schedule is the one that you prepare yourself. Whatever you do, PBL has to be the center of your preparation. More than 2/3 of your time should be based on problem-based learning. Even though often you will not feel you're ready to do certain types of questions, it is better to jump in both feet first, and then you can study around the issues that come to the fore after you've practiced. This is a very efficient way to study, and it helps to ensure that your mindset remains resonant with ACER and that you don't start going down a path of memorizing irrelevant details. And finally, with regards to studying, your environment. With regards to your study space, some research suggests that exam performance is enhanced if the environment is the same as where you actually encoded the information. And so, you sat in the same chair, at the same desk, exercising the same GAMSAT level reasoning hundreds of times, if not thousands. Now, one more day, and this one is officially scored. It's an intellectual exercise, and you are performing your Olympic sport in your home gym. And so now you have the time to plan. Where do you intend to sit the real online GAMSAT? Well, that should be confirmed as your study space. Now let's talk about your computer screen. Bigger is better wins the argument. There are some students going into the forums and discussing whether or not their 13-inch laptop will do. And of course, ACER has responded that 15 inches or more is ideal. However, a 13-inch laptop is acceptable. Of course, if you have no choice, you have no choice. But I don't think that anybody is in a situation where a 13-inch laptop is the only way to do this once-in-a-lifetime exam. You might be able to borrow a desktop or even rent a desktop for a small fraction of the cost of sitting the exam, I would definitely suggest a desktop, and I would use a gamer's monitor, for example, 32 inches if possible. And just to be clear, for a real exam, you can open up your exam booklet and see the graph or passage on an even page. And then below the passage, there are multiple choice questions which may spill into the odd number page. But the point is that you can see the passage, graph, table, or diagram and the multiple choice questions at the same time, which aids in the efficiency of answering questions. And so if you combine the fact that you have a very large computer screen and a zoom function, it increases your ability to simulate the paper exam and clearly increases your efficiency, and is one of more than a dozen reasons that you can only call this exam standardized with a wink and a nod. And as I said before, I do think the new online exam was the right decision in order to preserve the perennial medical school application season, but it is clearly a compromise exam. And now let's talk about your scratch paper. You will have 2 A4 sheets for the first session that include section 1 and section 2, and then 2 A4 sheets for the second session, which involves section 3. As I mentioned in the first video, I believe that it's best to use some sort of thin graph paper. And the logic behind this is, number one, having lines on paper will make you more efficient with space. I should specify by saying it makes most people more efficient with space. And so know thyself. But also, with respect to graph paper, should you be in the unusual situation that you would benefit by redrawing a graph, then my goodness, on a blank sheet, you might make your markings such that it doesn't accurately reflect the graph that you're looking at, and then you might make mistakes just because your reproduction wasn't specific enough. But with graph paper, you could ensure that the range between units is reasonably accurate. And I mention thin paper because unless your proctor says otherwise, then thin paper will allow you to approximate the graph you're looking at by placing the graph paper over the image of the graph from your computer screen. And so my suggestion is to have the A4 graph paper ready, but to also have simple lined A4 paper ready and completely blank A4 paper ready, just in case the proctor at the beginning of your session provides clarification on this issue, which ACER currently has not clarified. Now let's talk about economy. Again, know thyself. For some students, half a page of scratch notes is enough for each session. And yes, that includes planning the essays. But for other students, 2 sheets is insufficient. Obviously, it would be to your advantage to sit this new online format of the exam multiple times before the real exam. And each time you use your 2 sheets of scratch paper. And of course, you're going to develop familiarity with it and so on. So now I want to talk to the people who, they've discovered that 2 sheets is at the limit for them. Then there are some issues that you can do with regards to economy. I have tried to give an example illustration here. So basically, for both economy and clarity of content, and in order to prevent your hard work from looking like spaghetti, it is ideal to separate your work with lines and to add the question number in a circle in the box where you were doing that work. It's rare for students to have extra time at the end of section 1 or section 3 to review their work. But if ever there were a GAMSAT where this is going to be possible, it's this one. And so you want to do your work in such a clear, easy to follow way, such that later, if you're reviewing it, you know exactly which question number, and because it's clearly presented, it increases the chance that you can pick up silly errors. Because unlike a traditional university exam where your professor worked out the right answer and your professor may or may not have worked out one of the other wrong answers, ACER's routine is to work out all three wrong answers in order to catch students who did most of the calculation properly, but not all of it. And so showing your work very clearly is important in order for you to review it later. I also drew a triangle in the image, and that's because I carefully went over Section 1 and Section 3 of ACER's pink booklet, their newest GAMSAT practice test, to determine if there were any graphs that I felt I would have benefited by redrawing. And the only one that came close was the ternary diagram, because this very special triangular diagram had multiple questions based on the graph. And especially if you're going to be using a 15-inch screen, it would have been challenging to answer those questions without redrawing the graph. I'm not saying that it's absolutely necessary, but in this case, I think it would have been easier for many students. And finally, at the bottom, I would have one line with an asterisk where I would write numbers during my reading time of the units that I want to attack first. And then I would have a second line at the bottom of the page where I would write the question numbers of questions that I really want to go back to at the end of the exam, if there's time. So what else will you use your paper for? Will you take notes? For example, after reading a paragraph, just writing the general idea of the paragraph? Although I don't think this is time efficient, I do believe that you should spend weeks to come finding your own best technique. Will you be redrawing graphs? I hope not, or at least it should be relatively rare. What about redrawing organic chemistry mechanisms? Again, I hope not, or it should be very rare, but when I reviewed the pink booklet, I did not see any need for it. However, a few units of pattern recognition organic chemistry may require a significant amount of drawing, and so yet another reason for you to practice. And finally, of course, you're going to be calculating, but I would only suggest that you add an extra line or two. Meaning, when you normally do step-by-step calculations, sometimes students will skip steps that they're very familiar with. I would suggest that out of an abundance of caution, you write in those additional steps so that at the very end of the exam, if you have extra time, you will have greater confidence in your double-checking skills. And now let's talk about skills specific to Section 2. Of the three sections of the exam, Section 2 is most akin to the traditional paper GAMSAT. Having the 5 minutes of reading time rolled into the 60 minutes of section time is an advantage for you. After all, when you're looking at the very first quote or comment for writing test A of section 2, you will be immediately permitted to start writing your ideas. And so you can look at writing test A, brainstorm, put those thoughts on your scratch paper, and then it would be up to you whether or not you want to look at writing test B at that time, which would be a traditional approach. But at least now you can write your ideas at the same time. And thus, I don't feel that anybody would spend 5 minutes as so-called reading time, because within the first minute of the 65 minutes, it would be helpful to already have started preparing your ideas for your essay. And so reading time is significantly decreased which gives you more time to complete your 2 essays. Obviously, all your practice for the weeks to come for Section 2 should include typing, because everyone's different, and for some people they are better at typing than writing, and others it's vice versa. So you definitely want to practice. And related to typing, no one knows yet whether or not copy and paste will work. And it is quite possible that Acer's not answering related questions because they're not sure. Now, in terms of the timing, I would use the traditional approach that's described in the gold standard books and in the course, in which you should spend 5 minutes planning your essay, 20 minutes writing your essay, and 5 minutes proofreading. And the proofreading isn't because having some spelling errors or grammar errors from time to time will have a significant impact, but rather it is because sometimes a missing word or a misspelt word may have a damaging effect on a particular sentence, which may affect the theme of that particular paragraph. And as you would traditionally do, keep an eye on the big picture. Don't be distracted by one comment or another, because your writing is based on the overall theme, which emphasizes the big picture. And then you can use one or more of the comments in order to advance your ideas related to the theme. Now let's move to Section 1 and 3. Of course, you've been provided with ample extra time for Section 1 and Section 3. Even if you were to include the fact that your reading time is incorporated into your exam time, you are still being provided with ample extra time. And so, similar to Section 2, I believe your reading time will be significantly decreased, because there is no reason for you to get deeply involved with any units on the exam without taking advantage of the fact that you have scratch paper. And so, in my estimation, your reading time will be of the order of 2 to 3 minutes. And during this time, you are hunting. Your hunt is based on, of course, your experience with yourself. Are you better at poetry? Are you better at drama? Are you better at sort of humor, cartoon, medical ethics, organic chemistry versus physics, electrochemistry versus flowcharts, or other forms of graph analysis? You are seeking units that are most consistent with your strengths, because ideally you will attack these first. Now again, if you're the type of student that you always finish the exam on time, then perhaps this is not a relevant discussion for you. But for an average student, finishing both Section 1 and Section 3 is out of the question. And so the focus must be to optimize one's score. And in order to do this, it means giving your best effort with respect to your strengths. And then if you run out of time, guessing because you're not penalized for wrong answers. And now the timing of the exam is also so incredibly different. For Section 1, the idea that you have 1.5 minutes per question means that after 30 minutes, you should have completed 20 questions. And logically, those would have been the 20 questions that you had chosen to be those in which you had the best chance at a good score. And so if you had not completed 20 questions, then you just guess on anything you feel you're not particularly good at, for example, a particularly long passage or a poem, and then you get yourself back on track for 20 questions in half an hour. Now, of course, you can be checking every 15 minutes. It's up to you how you want to manage your time, but at least be sure that you have your system. In a traditional paper exam, questions first is still the most efficient way to complete the exam. However, again, my suggestion to you is you try both techniques, either the passage first or the question first, and then you find what's best for you. So basically, the question first technique is you read the question stem, the beginning part of the question, and you glance at the answer choices, and then before even looking at the second question or the third question, you go into the passage and you seek to address the specific question that you're familiar with. And once you've answered that question, now you read the second question, and then you go back in the passage and you continue from where you stopped. Whether it be for section 1 or section 3, this is the most time-efficient way to complete the exam. However, there are students who have happily and successfully completed the exam going through the passage first. But most students who do that cannot finish the exam. The next issue is about the process of elimination. For those of you who know the gold standard GAMSAT online exams, we have a strikeout feature so that you can do the process of elimination. However, we are disabling it for our free mock exam based on the new format because ACER does not report such a feature. So first, as a reminder as to why process of elimination is so important, it's particularly because ACER loves opposites. So they'll have many questions based on except or not or something that reverses the question in some part. And then when ACER is really bored, they will use the opposite of an opposite. And so there are more than just a handful of questions during the exam that would benefit by the use of process of elimination. Now, usually, if you're not using a symbolic way to follow the use of process of elimination, what usually happens is students remember what they're looking for when they read A, they remember when they read B, but by C they've already reversed it in their minds. And so the perspective is often lost when reading answer choice D. So effective ways to deal with this. Let's say you're trying to apply the process of elimination to question number 8. And it is a question where things are increasing in concentration or things are becoming more numerous and others are becoming less numerous. Whether it be for section 1 or 3, you could just write the letter on a line like A and an arrow up or down to indicate what's happening in that answer choice. And then you do the same for B and the same for C. So if you have 3 arrows going down and 1 arrow going up, you know what the answer is. If you have 3 arrows pointing up and 1 arrow pointing down, then you know what the answer is. Likewise for question 17, if they're just statements that are true or false, you can just put an X above the letter or a check mark, and it allows you to quickly see what the answer is without the risk of reversing it in your mind. And then for the last issue, test proof. Now this is a issue that I do bring up in the book and in the courses, but I don't emphasize it because most students don't have time at the end of the exam to test proof their answers. Now the May-June exam is exactly the right exception because you will likely have time at the end, and now you can apply this very important skill. As an example, some of you may recognize a question that we did in class where you had to figure out the weight of the dogs used in a particular experiment. And some students chose 600 kilograms as the average weight of dogs used in a particular experiment. So to test proof a question means that you are basically playing devil's advocate and wondering how you could have gotten the question wrong. What about your answer can be viewed as incorrect? This process would catch something like a 600 kilogram dog, which is impossible. And it would force you to reassess the answer. ACER has a question in the pink booklet that they used on real GAMSATs for more than 10 years, which was a question for you to calculate the rate of growth of your fingernails in meters per second. One of the answer choices reveals an answer in which your nails grow many kilometers every year. And hopefully you recognize that as being impossible. This is a technique of test proofing. There are many answer choices that will be ridiculous. But sometimes if you cannot see the forest from the trees, you might fall into one of Acer's traps. So test proofing allows you to rethink the big picture. And for some of you who have very, very little experience practicing, you may not have developed that sixth sense. However, as you do more practice as the exam approaches, you will improve this skill to test proof answers, and it can have a significant impact. Now beware. If you've spent the time working out an answer, you can't just go back and change the answer based on minutia. Most studies on this topic reveal that if you really paid attention, you were really concentrating and focused when you chose your answer, then if you change your answer, you increase the likelihood of changing from correct to an incorrect answer. And that's why I mentioned to you before that on your scratch paper, you should really show all your lines of work. And this will permit you to test proof your answer later and to be presented with the evidence required to support the answer that you chose, or it will be more clear where you made a basic maths error. Now let's talk about exam level practice. As you know, Acer has 5 ebooks, 3 of which are full-length practice tests of the traditional paper format, and 2 of their ebooks are half-length tests. From these 5 ebooks, you have somewhere between 7 and 8 practice tests using the new online format in terms of the correct number of questions per exam section. And once again, the pink booklet is the gift that keeps on giving, because by sheer coincidence, you can complete a section 1 subtest because the 40th question ends at the end of a unit. And also by coincidence, you can complete a section 3 subtest because the 60th question ends at the end of a unit. And so within the pink booklet is a wonderful GAMSAT with the new format. I would only suggest, of course, that you complete the test with 2 pieces of scrap paper and you scroll up and down the PDF, permitting only 1 page at a time in order to simulate the worst possible scenario of the real online format. And of course, this way you will get used to all of the scrolling and the extent to which you will be using the scratch paper. Aside from the 5 Acer booklets, you may know that Gold Standard has 5 online exams, and that by the time this video is released, we would have also released an online mock exam with a similar format to the new GAMSAT for May-June. And so it will have navigation at the top, it will have a shortcut for zooming, and it will be timed according to the new schedule, which is 1 hour for section 1 with 40 multiple choice questions, 65 minutes for section 2, 2 hours for section 3, and there will be 60 multiple choice questions at a GAMSAT level with helpful worked solutions. So you can find that by going to GAMSATprep.com, logging in to your account or creating a free account, and then clicking on tests in the top menu and scrolling down, and the exam is automatically placed in your account. And then there is HEAPS, which refers to the 10 full-length exam book, which is available in online bookshops, GAMSATprep.com, and normally in university bookshops, but obviously that is not practical right now. Now in general, it's not that your objective should be that you need to try to sit 20 full-length practice tests. That's not the point. The point is to take the time to complete a full-length exam in 1 day according to the official schedule, and then spend an evening and a day reviewing the work solutions carefully and taking brief notes, which we of course called your gold notes, which you can review several times per week from the beginning. That's how you consolidate what you've learned into something that is actionable moving forward. And so sit an exam, consolidate your knowledge, learn around whatever weaknesses were revealed by the exam, convert that into very brief notes, review those notes often, and proceed to the next exam. Aside from your exam level practice, I also want to comment about your routine. Ideally, in the weeks leading up to the exam, you would lead your life similar to the exam day itself. You would wake up at a similar time, you would eat a similar boring breakfast, you would engage in intellectually challenging activities. Ideally, you would be sitting multiple exams in the days and weeks leading up to the real exam as you are getting your body and your mind used to this challenging intellectual routine. And as mentioned before, you would be doing this in the same space where you will be sitting the actual exam. I hope you will be adding to this an exploration of what diet allows you to remain alert, and you will be engaging in some sort of routine with regards to exercise and some measure of social interaction as permitted, and that you find ways to reward yourself when you have been successful at completing some of your studying goals, which will help you to relax, to chill, as you focus on something that you actually can control. And that is the effort that you give in order to optimize your GAMSAT score. And I do have to add my reminder of the expression edutainment, and I hope that you can see this exam as a way that you will be exposed to so much in terms of history, philosophy, humanities, the social sciences, maths, physics, organic chemistry. It is an incredibly unique exam in which you spend the entire day learning new information within the exam itself. So if you can see this as being something that is potentially entertaining as well as educational, then such a positive attitude will go far in sustaining you through this challenging exam. And now, finally, a word about safety to complete my alliteration. Structure, screen, security, strategy, studies, and now safety. Of course, I hope you're able to stay safe and healthy during this stressful time for you and your loved ones. Wash your hands frequently. Avoid touching your face. I know it's not easy, but it's important. And of course, stay informed about national and local recommendations regarding self-isolation. I don't particularly like the expression social isolation because we are social animals. However, where necessary, physical isolation may be warranted, but you may remain social through technology. So make sure to take some breaks and connect with your family and friends and or pets. You are one of the few, the brave, sitting an exam that has never existed before in this format. Is it the beginnings or the last throes of the exam itself? Who knows? We at Gold Standard GAMSAT hope to see your way through this May-June exam. Thereafter, the GAMSAT score results are expected to be available in early July. Then we prepare for the September GAMSAT courses. And then, likely this fall, we will release a whole set of new Gold Standard GAMSAT books. We all have a lot of work to get done. I wish you best of luck with your studies. And if you have any questions, come to the forum at gamsat-prep.com and post. Bye for now.